Today we're going to answer how we get water to all of this. Hello everyone, this is Dwayne with Edge of Nowhere Farm, and we're coming to you here on a very early July morning in 2021. So if you guys have been following us along, you know that we have spent the last year and a half turning this raw desert land into a functioning farm. At least we're starting it. So a year and a half in, we've had a lot of you guys ask how we get our water, where it comes from, how consistent is the source, how do you basically get the one essential ingredient to having anything survive really anywhere on earth. We're here in the Sonoran Desert in Arizona, and we have a very similar climate to a lot of the Middle East, and of course all of us here in the desert Southwest. One of the challenges that we all have, especially this year and really most years, is severe drought, and we're all facing that to varying degrees. So the question for us here has been, do you guys have enough water? Is it a secure source? What's the quality of the water like? And we wanted to do a quick video today and do a couple different videos where we talk specifically about how we manage water here on the farm, and more importantly, how will we manage it into the future. We would have to start this discussion on where our water that we use every day for the house and for the farm comes from, and that's right over here. We're here on the northeastern part of the property. In fact, it's the far northeast corner of the property. So one of the things that we know about our property is it slopes gently from north to south. One of the reasons we have the house and we have the water here is we want to make sure that it's very easy to flow water from the top of the property, or the highest point, to the lowest point. And that's what the well placement does for us. The location of the well itself here is about 150 feet from the house, so we don't have far to go to get water to the house. And then of course for the rest of the farm, while it doesn't matter too much that we have it sloping south, it definitely doesn't hurt. Now let's talk a little bit about the well itself, some of the specifics. So if you guys are considering this yourselves, you guys will get some ideas. Now, one of the things with this is we did have this professionally installed. In fact, I'm going to link our house building series here, and towards the beginning of that, you'll see we had a few different episodes on the installation of this well itself. That will give you some details as far as that is concerned. However, let's talk a little bit about the well and the pump and pump assembly. This here is our well cap. All the rest of this here is designed to run the pump that is down, it's about 500 feet or so down, and that is pumping water up into our tank. Now the well, it goes down just over 600 feet, which is very typical for us here in the Whitman area for the aquifer that we're all on. And the water levels are extremely consistent. So when we had the well installed a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, we were hitting water at really a few hundred feet. So we hit water and kind of slush at about 300, 350 feet, but the static water level is about 420 feet down, and that's very, very typical in the range for us here in the Whitman area. And that only hovers about a foot or so from year to year, really regardless of the weather that we get. It's a very, very consistent aquifer that we're drawing from. Now down at the bottom, or down at that 500 foot level, we have a pump that is pumping about 13 gallons per minute from that water table and bringing it into this tank that you see right here next to me. This tank is a 5,000 gallon tank. We use that size tank on purpose. The main reason why we have a 13 gallon per minute pump inside the well is because we're restricted on how much water we can pull out of the aquifer at any given time. And while that presents a challenge, it also is a huge benefit because I had mentioned the consistency of all of our wells here in Whitman, and that's because of those restrictions that are in place. So regardless of what you're doing out here, you're restricted on the amount of water you can pull at any given time. So because of that, we compensate with a larger tank. So we have a 5,000 gallon tank versus what most homes would use out here, a 2,500 to 3,000 gallon tank. But once the water is pumped into this tank, it is then actually pressurized. So the water comes right out of the tank here and it's pressurized by that pump. So that pump is a workhorse. It gets a lot of work pretty much on a daily basis. The water goes from the tank through that pump into these pressure tanks. The actual pressure coming out of these tanks is measured by this PSI gauge right here. And looking at it, we're at just under 50 PSI, which is pretty typical for a house pressure system. And then of course, that's what also runs all of the pressure for the rest of our irrigation system. So let's go ahead and look at that right here. This is actually the pipe that runs to the house. As I was saying, we're about 150 feet or so from where the entry of the water is to the house. There is a 1-inch PVC line that runs from here underground over to the house, and that's actually where we get all of our water from the house. When we had this system installed, we explained to our driller that we were going to be doing irrigation on the farm, and so he actually had a separate branch or T that he installed here that comes over specifically for the irrigation system for the farm. George, our irrigation guy, is fantastic. He's been working with us the better part of 6 years now. He's been part of all of our installations on both farms and this one as well. And he actually did the installation of this for us. As we have a 1.5-inch pipe that comes out of here. We have an anti-siphon valve here that ensures that we don't have any water being drawn back into the tanks. We definitely don't want that. That's what this is here. This sediment filter is at the beginning of our irrigation system. This water is running directly to all the valves that turn off and on as far as the irrigation is concerned. So we don't want any sediment that is definitely coming out of the tank because it's coming directly from the ground. We don't want to have any sediment in our irrigation systems. When we were having this system designed, we needed to take into account the distances that we were going to be traveling. All of our pressure up to this point is at 50 PSI. As it continues to travel longer distances, you lose pressure and you lose water flow. We wanted to make sure, more importantly, water flow was maintained throughout the system as best as possible. So a 1.5-inch line we determined with our distances was going to be just fine. Of course, from here it travels over to kind of the hub as far as the irrigation is concerned. So let's go take a look at that. This here is actually kind of the focal point of the irrigation for the entire farm. All of our valves are in here, and this is really the heart of the farm itself because of water, which is critical for everything we do. The first thing we have in place, you'll see here is another ball valve. So that's where the water's coming in that 1.5-inch line. This is our safety net in case we need to work on the irrigation system. It's completely separate from the permanent line that we have out to all the other spigots on the farm. We want to make sure we have access to water if for some reason we need to work on the irrigation system. You'll see we have our valve set aside for our garden beds. So because these are lower pressure lines, we have filters and pressure regulators attached here so that we reduce the pressure from 50 PSI down to 25 PSI. Next set of valves that you're going to see here would be some of our main valves for our fruit trees. All of our fruit trees are on 1.25-inch lines. They're fully pressurized, so we didn't reduce any pressure at all. So if you remember, we had talked a little bit about the flow of water out of the well itself. That's 13 gallons per minute. We also measured the flow of water after we got past that anti-siphon valve. We found that we were still at about 13 gallons per minute. That line size we kept nice and large because we wanted that same 13 gallons per minute as far away from these valves as we would be, which in one case is about 1,000 feet or so. And as you'll see, we have a tremendous amount of flow there as well. All these valves, of course, have to be run, and we do that on an automated system. So we're gonna peek into the garage, and I'm gonna show you the controller that we're using in order to literally control the water flow on the farm. This is the kind of the brain of the operation as far as the irrigation is concerned. We'll go over this in more detail in our irrigation episodes. It's the Hunter HydroWise controller. It's a 24-station controller. It is Wi-Fi enabled. We'll show you that here in just a moment. Really what I want to show you more than anything is kind of just this hub back here. Now, we've had several different types of controllers over the years. This one, obviously with 24 stations, we're only using 11. However, we do have plans for expansion and we have plenty of space in here. Now, it has all the capability of setting your zones and that kind of thing here at the controller. However, because it's Wi-Fi controlled and there is an app that goes along with it, I actually use the app for everything. I actually never come back here. Unless we're having some type of issue, which we haven't, I don't come back here at all. And one of the other things with this controller, what's really nice is the fact that all of my settings are stored basically in the cloud or in the app. So even if I lose power to this, all of my settings are actually saved and they're in the app. So I don't have an issue with losing all of that or having to deal with a battery backup. Either way, you can see how this hub is set up. Again, that's the Pro HC is actually the specific model number and a 24 station controller. All right, so what I wanna do, we're gonna head out to one of our fruit trees. I wanna show you how this works with one of our bubblers. Now I wanna show you how this controller works. So that Hunter system is Wi-Fi enabled. So I'm gonna go into the app here. You can see I have all of my zones set up here. So this particular zone is West 1. I'm gonna choose that. I already have my runtime and everything entered, but I just wanna go ahead and hit the play button. So I'm gonna hit start here in just a moment, but I'm gonna have Lori slide over here so you can actually see the bubbler itself. All I'm gonna do is hit the stop button. That's gonna turn off our water. Air escaping the line's a good sign. We have some in-ground spigots that we have placed so that we have access to water on the farm in multiple areas. So we're gonna head to the furthest point, about 1,000 feet from that wellhead. You'll see the water flow and pressure that we're getting in our main line. The well and pump house is cat a corner from where we're at now. So based on how we have the lines laid out, we're about 1,000 feet, maybe a little over 1,000 feet from that wellhead. So this is the furthest away our main line is going to be. We have an in-ground spigot set up here. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the cover off of that, and you'll see this is what we use in order to tap into this line. So all we do is just basically press that down, this will swivel, and then I wanna give you guys an idea quickly, because I don't wanna waste the water, but I'll give you guys an idea of just how much flow we get from this spigot at the furthest point away from the farm. Plenty of water flow coming from this main line as far away from that wellhead as it gets. Well, at least some of this ground's got a little bit of water on it. First time in months. One of the things that water brings is life, and that's really what we're focused on here, is not only living our best lives and also that for the folks that we grow food for and raise food for, but obviously for wildlife as well. And you can see we have this small bird bath here that the honeybees love to drink from, and we're here first thing in the morning. We have some sunflowers right over here. We have some alfalfa in the pasture that has flower, and these guys are grabbing a drink of water to stay cool here during the day. So let's talk a little bit about the idea of farming in the desert and is it sustainable? I think I want to start out with telling you guys a story. My grandfather, he lived in Los Angeles, worked for McDonnell Douglas, and he retired at the age of 55 in 1973, which is the same year that I happened to be born. He bought land in Southern Oregon, right outside of Grants Pass, if you guys are familiar with Oregon. Oregon, by the way, is a beautiful state, and I traveled there every summer to spend some time with my grandpa and do some fishing. He moved there in 1973 with the intentions of living a better life. So he was in the city, and he wanted to get out of the city onto a piece of land and live more naturally. You know, this was almost 50 years ago that he made this move. And it was a great move for him. I saw pictures of the day that he retired. He had dark circles underneath his eyes. He looked like he was on death's door. And then as I came to know him 10 years or more later as a kid, he looked much healthier. I remember that. And he lived to almost 101 years old and spent almost his entire half of his life, second half of his life, on that 5 acres of land. Now, when most folks think of Oregon, as do I think of just this beautiful green country. And while it has drought, the same as a lot of us do, I immediately go to rain and beautiful green because I remember that. But at the same time, I remember extremely hot summers, 105 degrees, very similar to what we have here. And what I remember most is the fact that the water was amazing. Now, where did he get that water? 50 years ago? He dug a hole in the ground and started pumping water out of an aquifer in Southern Oregon. That's how they got all of their water. In fact, if you go across this country, if you're outside of the city, you're getting your water typically from a well down in the ground. So no different from what we're doing here. Now, do I agree with mass production farming, pumping water out of the ground to irrigate land, have it evaporate into the air, and then take those things and sell them across the country to other countries? Absolutely not. Do I think that there's better ways of managing that? Yes, I do. And that's what we're focused on here. So yes, we need to bring water from the ground. It's what sustains us. It's what allows this farm to establish. It's what allows most farms out there to establish. No difference. Now, of course, we're very hot, and we take that into account. On the trees you see behind me here, you'll see massive rings. In fact, I'll link a video for you here where we go over how we design our rings and the swale and berm system that's essentially created to capture the water as it's being emitted onto the trees. Capture the water when we get our heavy rainfalls here to give them a deluge of water. At the same time, it keeps the temperature below those wood chips cooler. So you'll see about 1 foot of wood chips on these trees. You dig your hand at the bottom of those wood chips, you can literally feel how much cooler the air is in the ground. The ground stays moist because we're trapping the moisture down on the ground. At the same time, we have different areas of the farm that are designed to capture and maintain water. All of the plants that we put in the ground, those root systems will do just that. They'll grab the water that it does get, put it back down into the ground to give it more holding capacity. So every time we do get rains, you'll see all of the areas around us here will have standing water for multiple days, 3, 4, 5 days up to a week. Everywhere on the farm where we've been and we've done things on the farm, that water's gone within 20 or 30 minutes. It's immediately pulled down into the soil, and it's doing what? Eventually refilling that aquifer. We talked a little bit about how consistent the aquifer here is in Whitman. One of the reasons is the Hassayampa River runs just past us here. So when the water does come in, it sinks into that river and goes back down in to fill up that aquifer. So of course, what we're doing here is we're doing something a little bit different from all of our neighbors here. In fact, most people that live on a well or outside of the city, they have water, they're using it for their needs, they're watering grass, they have a pool, they're doing these other things. We don't do those things here. So what we do is we grow food, we raise animals. That food provides for us, that food provides for other families. We're designing this property so that it holds and maintains water. It holds water on the property. It helps to refill that aquifer, and it changes the environment around us. But imagine if people did the same thing with the water that they pull from the ground. They do what they can to maintain the moisture. They grow trees that help change the climate. And if all of us did this exact same thing, those questions that we get of how can you pull water from the ground and justify that would be fully justified, because that water is going to create an environment that maintains that life. And that's exactly what we're focused on here. Now, are we perfect? Do we know everything? No. At the same time, do we want to be regenerative? And the reality for us here in the desert is actually generate life from where there was none? Absolutely. And for those of you who are here with us, I think you guys do too. So just want to thank you guys for joining us today. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. We obviously cover a lot of things here. As we get more in place on the farm, we're going to continue to share some of these things because I think it's important for all of us that we get more of a big picture view on the things that we do, and that's really what we're trying to concentrate on here. Would love it if you would join us, and hey, share the content. If you know anybody that would be interested in this kind of thing, we would really encourage you to do that. It helps to support the farm here. And our Amazon shop, we'll leave a link down in the description, another free way to help support the channel. If you start with that link, it doesn't matter what you buy, you help to support us here. So just want to thank you for joining us today and remind you, if we can farm on the edge of nowhere, so can you.
That's a funny blooper.
Well, I could see a weird reflection. Hopefully that's better. I'm gonna literally spray our coffee mugs into oblivion. Take two.